It was supposed to be a peaceful Saturday evening. My entire family had gathered at my house for dinner. My parents were visiting. My brother was with his children, and my wife was preparing food in the kitchen. Everything was normal until someone suddenly knocked on the door. I opened it and saw Karen standing there. Karen was the self-appointed queen of our neighborhood. She complained about everything: kids playing outside, cars parked on the street, music, garbage cans, and even people's gardens. She looked past me and saw the cars parked outside. "You're having a party," she said angrily. "No," I replied, "it's just my family. We're having dinner." Karen pointed toward the street. "There are too many cars here. You're violating HOA rules." I tried to explain that my parents and brother were only visiting. But Karen wasn't interested. "I already warned you," she said. "You warned me about having my own family over." Her face turned red. "You'll hear from the HOA." Then she walked away. I thought that was the end of it. I was completely wrong. About 30 minutes later, I heard sirens outside. I looked through the window. 2 police cars had stopped directly in front of my house. My wife looked at me nervously. "What happened?" I stepped outside. One of the officers asked, "Are you the homeowner?" "Yes. We received a complaint about a disturbance and possible threats." I immediately knew who had called. "Karen." I explained everything. My family was inside eating dinner. Nobody was fighting, nobody was threatening anyone, and there was no disturbance. The officers looked inside and saw my family sitting around the dinner table. After a few questions, they realized the complaint was completely false. One officer said, "Everything seems fine, have a good night." The police left. I thought Karen had finally gone too far, but I had no idea what she was planning next. That night around 2 a.m., my security camera sent me an alert. Someone was standing near my mailbox. I opened the camera footage. My heart stopped. It was Karen. She looked around carefully, walked onto my property, and placed something underneath my mailbox. Then she quickly walked away. The next morning, I went outside and found an envelope. Inside was an official-looking HOA letter. It claimed that I had been fined $5,000 for violating neighborhood rules. But there was one problem. Something about the letter didn't look right. So I called the actual HOA president. His response shocked me. "What $5,000 fine?" I sent him a picture of the letter. After a long silence, he said, "That letter did not come from us." I stared at the envelope in my hand. Karen hadn't just called the police on my family. She had created a fake HOA document, and now I knew this was much bigger than a simple neighborhood argument. The HOA president's words kept playing in my head. That letter did not come from us. I looked at the fake $5,000 notice again. Karen had gone from annoying neighbor to something much more serious. I asked the HOA president to meet me that afternoon. When he arrived, I showed him the security footage. The video clearly showed Karen walking onto my property at 2 a.m. and placing the envelope under my mailbox. The president watched the footage twice. "This is serious," he said. "I know," I replied, "but why would she do this?" He didn't answer. Instead, he opened his laptop. "I want to show you something." He pulled up the HOA complaint records. There were dozens of complaints filed against different homeowners, and many of them had one thing in common. Karen's name appeared again and again. One complaint claimed a family was holding illegal parties. Another accused a man of violating parking rules. Another said a woman was damaging the neighborhood with her garden. I asked, "Were these complaints investigated?" "Yes," he said. "And?" Most of them were either exaggerated or completely false. I couldn't believe it. "How long has this been happening?" "For almost 2 years. Then he showed me something even stranger. Several homeowners had withdrawn their complaints after receiving unexpected demands from Karen. The president lowered his voice. "Some people told us Karen asked them for money to stop filing complaints against them." My stomach tightened. So she was using the HOA rules to scare people? That's what it looks like. I immediately remembered something. A few months earlier, my neighbor Mike had suddenly sold his house. At the time, everyone thought he simply wanted to move. Now I wondered if Karen had something to do with it. I called Mike. He answered after several rings. When I told him about the fake $5,000 letter, he became silent. Then he said something that shocked me. Karen did the same thing to me. I asked him to explain. He told me Karen had repeatedly complained about his driveway. Then one day she gave him an $8,000 HOA penalty notice. He panicked and eventually decided to sell his house. But Mike had kept every message Karen had sent him. He still had copies of the documents, and most importantly, he had saved the original messages where Karen threatened him. I asked him to send everything to me. That evening I had a folder filled with evidence: fake documents, security footage, false police complaints, messages from former homeowners, and records of Karen's complaints. For the first time I realized something. Karen wasn't trying to punish me. She had been doing this to the entire neighborhood. I called the HOA president. "We need an emergency meeting." He agreed, but neither of us knew that Karen was about to walk into that meeting believing she had already won. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for Friday evening. By then I had collected everything: the fake $5,000 notice, the security footage, the police report, Mike's messages, and complaints from other homeowners. When I arrived at the meeting, several neighbors were already there. Everyone looked nervous. Then Karen walked in. She was smiling. She looked around the room and said, "I hope we're finally going to deal with the people breaking our neighborhood rules." She had no idea what was coming. The HOA president stood up. "Karen, before we discuss any new complaints, we need to discuss several complaints you filed." Her smile disappeared. "What do you mean?" He placed a folder on the table. "We've reviewed your complaints from the last 2 years." Karen crossed her arms. "So?" The president opened the first file. This complaint was investigated and found to be false. He opened another. Same thing. Then another. False. Karen immediately became defensive. "You can't prove that." I quietly placed the security footage on the table. "We can prove this one." The room became silent. The president played the video. Everyone watched Karen walking onto my property at 2 a.m. Then the video showed her placing the fake HOA notice under my mailbox. Karen's face went pale. "That doesn't prove anything." I held up the $5,000 letter. The HOA president already confirmed this document is fake. One neighbor stood up. "She did something similar to me." Another woman spoke. "She threatened me with an HOA fine because my flowers were too tall." Then Mike walked into the room. Karen stared at him. "You?" Mike placed his old documents on the table. "She gave me a fake $8,000 penalty notice, too." Karen started shouting, "You're all lying!" But nobody was listening anymore. The HOA president turned toward her. "Where did these documents come from?" Karen didn't answer. "Did you create them?" Still nothing. Then the president said something that changed everything. "We contacted the police." Karen froze. "You what?" "We've provided them with the evidence." Suddenly there was a knock at the meeting room door. 2 police officers walked inside. Karen looked around the room. For the first time, she wasn't the person controlling the situation. She was the person everyone was looking at. One officer said, "Karen, we'd like to ask you a few questions." Karen stepped backward. "This is ridiculous." But the officer calmly replied, "Then you'll have nothing to worry about." As Karen walked outside with the officers, nobody said a word. But the HOA president wasn't finished. He turned toward us and said, "There is one more thing we discovered." Everyone looked at him. He opened another file. "This goes much deeper than we thought." I stared at the folder, and suddenly I realized that the fake $5,000 letter might have been only the beginning. The HOA president placed the new folder on the table. Everyone became silent. "What did you find?" I asked. He looked at me and said, "Karen wasn't only creating fake fines." He opened the folder. Inside were copies of emails, bank transfers, and messages from several homeowners. "She was asking people for money," he explained. "She told them that if they paid her, she would stop filing complaints against them." The room erupted with anger. One homeowner stood up. "She asked me for $2,000. Another said, "She demanded $1,500 from me." Then the president showed us something even worse. Karen had been keeping a private list of homeowners she wanted to force out of the neighborhood. My name was near the top. I couldn't believe it. "Why me?" The president pointed to another document. "Because you refused to listen to her." Suddenly everything made sense. Karen wasn't angry about the cars outside my house. She wasn't really angry about my family. She wanted control. And when I refused to give it to her, she decided to target me. The next morning, the police contacted me. They asked for copies of my security footage and the fake HOA letter. I gave them everything. A few days later, I received another call. This time, it was from the HOA president. Karen has been officially removed from the committee. I felt relieved. But then he added, she has also been banned from contacting homeowners on behalf of the HOA. I thought the nightmare was finally over. Then I noticed something strange. Karen's house had a large moving truck parked outside. She was leaving. My wife looked through the window. Is she really moving? I nodded. But before she left, Karen did something unexpected. She came to my front door. I opened it. She stood there quietly. No shouting, no threats, no angry face. She looked completely different. I want to apologize, she said. I didn't respond. She continued. I shouldn't have called the police. You didn't just call the police, I said. You tried to destroy my family's reputation. She looked down. I know. And the fake HOA fine? She sighed. I was angry. Anger doesn't explain everything you did. Karen didn't argue. For several seconds, neither of us said anything. Finally, she said, I made a terrible mistake. I looked at her. No, Karen, you made a choice. Her eyes filled with tears. Then she turned around and walked toward the moving truck. I watched her leave, but I still didn't know what would happen next. Because the police investigation wasn't finished, and there was one final piece of evidence that could change everything. The police investigation continued for another week. Then one afternoon, an officer came to my house. He had a folder in his hand. We found the final piece of evidence, he said. I immediately knew what he meant. The officer explained that investigators had searched through Karen's messages and computer records. They found copies of several fake HOA documents. And there was something else. Karen had saved a document with the names of homeowners she wanted to target. My name was on that list. The officer told me that Karen had planned to create more complaints against my family. She had even written down ideas for future accusations. I couldn't believe how far she had gone. The officer said the evidence would be used in the investigation for harassment, false reports, and creating fraudulent documents. For the first time in weeks, I finally felt safe. A few days later, Karen's house was completely empty. The moving truck was gone. Her mailbox had been removed. And the neighborhood was quiet. No angry knocks, no fake HOA notices, no police cars outside anyone's home. Just peace. That weekend, my family gathered in the backyard again. My parents came over. My brother brought his children. The kids played outside while everyone laughed and ate dinner. My wife looked at me and smiled. It feels normal again. I smiled back. Then my father raised his glass. To peaceful neighbors. Everyone laughed. We never saw Karen again. Months later, the HOA changed its rules. No single homeowner could issue penalties or make official-looking notices without approval from the board. Security cameras were installed around common areas, and the neighborhood became closer than ever. People who had been afraid to speak finally started talking. We realized something important. Karen had spent years trying to divide everyone, but in the end, her actions did the opposite. She brought everyone together. The lesson was simple. You don't have to fight every bully with anger. Sometimes you just need patience, evidence, and the truth. Karen thought she could control our neighborhood by frightening everyone. She thought calling the police would make my family afraid. She thought a fake $5,000 fine would make me surrender. But she made one mistake. She underestimated the power of evidence. The next morning after she left, I opened my mailbox. There was one final envelope. For a moment, I thought Karen had returned. But it wasn't from her. It was a letter from the HOA. Inside were 3 words. Case officially closed. I smiled. Then I walked back inside to join my family. And for the first time in a long time, our home was completely peaceful.